I'm so excited to be here today because we're going to be talking about a very important topic, which is assessing the level of dangerousness. I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy, but before I hop into this, I want to make sure that you can all hear me. So if somebody who's present, could you just let me know that that sounds okay? Because I'm doing something new for sound today. So I want to make sure that it's, before I go live on the other two streams, I want to make sure that you guys can hear me. So would someone let me know that, put a thumbs up or something that the sound's good? I'm going to assume that it is because I see sound registering here. So, but let's talk about dangerousness, how to assess dangerousness. Oh, great. Thank you so much, Marie. I appreciate that. I got a call this week. Actually, it was a text message. I woke up early yesterday morning and somebody that I knew, somebody close to me, had contacted me to let me know that they had been abused, that there had been an altercation that morning, and that they had been struck pretty significantly, enough so that she was afraid for her safety, and she had fled. She'd fled the area. She'd actually locked herself into the bathroom. And she wanted to know, so here's this chat going on between me and her about what the next steps to do. How do you keep yourself safe when you are feeling very afraid for yourself? And here's even the bigger question. And the bigger question is, how do we know when the danger that we perceive to be in is actually valid? How do we know that we're in a relationship with somebody who has a potential of harming us? In fact, it was interesting because I posted a video earlier today about this, and somebody commented and said the thing that stops them from harming people or doing bad things is because they know they could get caught and they don't want the consequence of that. But otherwise, if they thought that there was that there was no stop, there was no punishment, that they could get away with it, they would do the very thing that they're thinking to do, which I found, it's a horrifying thought, but I think unfortunately there are a lot of people who have this perspective. So there's kind of two ends. There's the end of people who feel like they're terrified if they do something because they think of something that they're going to do it, just because they may have a really strange thought that crosses their mind, that just like say, for example, that you're like in a loft and you can look over the stairwell and you can see that long staircase down, a long drop, and you suddenly get afraid that what if you were to fall? You have that weird thought that crosses your head. What's the likelihood of that you actually falling? People who have these thoughts often get scared that because they're having them, then that means they're likely to actually trip and fall over the edge. They act like that's a real possibility. And then how do you know when you're in a relationship with somebody who's making threats that the threats are valid? So I want to talk about that today and talk about assessing lethality. And I want you to please know, however, that just because I'm saying this, that please don't take this as an assessment on your situation. Every person needs to judge their own situation on a case-by-case situation. And just because I'm saying some things and then you determine based on what I'm saying that maybe you're not a threat, I wouldn't do that. I would please get professional counsel in order to assess the validity of the possible threat. But I want to talk about it from a large level because I think it's really, really important. I know that I was way more in danger in that past relationship than I thought that I was. I underestimated this person's lethality. I underestimated the risk that I was in. And I think as a culture, we do that a lot. We have this perspective that bad things are things that happen on television, or bad things happen to other people, that they don't actually happen to people we know. So that when somebody actually tells us a horrifying story or says to us they're afraid for their life, we often tell them they're probably making way too much of a big deal out of it, that they're way overestimating the actual threat level. And I want to challenge you on that. I want you not to do that to the people in your world. And if you're also doing it to yourself, if you're somehow diminishing the threat level that you're in, that I don't want you doing that because you could be really very much in danger. I hear all the time horrible stories of people who have attempted to harm their loved ones, and especially in a narcissistically abusive relationship where your partner may have some psychopathy or can't say that word today, sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies. You could definitely be at risk. So I want to stop for a moment and introduce myself. I'm so excited you're here. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy. I am a psychologist with over 20 years of experience, and I'm a narcissistic abuse survivor. And I've also survived direct assault. I've been an assault victim and survived assault. So I have been in truly dangerous situations. And interestingly enough, every time that happened, my world diminished the risk I was in and said I was probably being way too dramatic, as well as I underestimated the risks that I was in. That past relationship that I was in, I just recently posted a video letting you know, and I write about it in Love You More. So I certainly share it in my book, Love You More, the details of this, which, by the way, now is available on in TikTok Shop if you're interested in getting a heart and a paperback copy from me. And I'd even be open to autographing it for you if you're interested. But near the end of the relationship, I was showing a lot of really weird physiological symptoms. I had been hospitalized once for reasons they could never determine why, but they said I was really ill. I actually collapsed on a plane, and there was an onboard doctor who said, and I couldn't, when I came to, I couldn't talk. I could see the pictures of words in my head, the like images of things, but I couldn't find the words. And he said I'd either suffered a stroke or I'd suffered a heart attack. Thankfully, I didn't suffer either of those. I had a thorough workup once I was able to get home. But and I had white lines across all my fingernails. And I remember sitting on the bed next to my ex, who was watching TV at the time, researching what does it mean when you have white lines crossing the bed of your nails. You know how when you like ding your fingernail and like with a hammer or something, you get these damage lines. Well, I had damage lines across all my fingernails, lines across, and my toenails were falling off. I later, when I was writing the book, Love You More, my writing partner said, I think he was poisoning you. I had thought that in the marriage. I had wondered if he was poisoning me. He would often bring me mineral water, special mineral water at night, not every night, but often. And I got a hold of a poison control nurse and had a conversation with them, and went through the whole list of my symptoms, which I really don't want to get into here because some of them are kind of graphic and gross. And she said, oh yeah, you described heavy metal poisoning. You either were being poisoned with arsenic or thallium. And then I talked to a doctor in Atlanta, and who also was a poison specialist, told them the same story. And they said, oh yeah, it sounds definitely like you were being poisoned, that this person was poisoning you. And then to confirm it, I interviewed this person's past relationships. And the wife, he'd been married more than once before. And the wife he was the most quiet about, he said very little about her. It took me a year to get a hold of her. Finally, I had this interview. Like I said, I was wrapping up the book, and I really wanted to get the other stories of the other women. So I get her on the phone conversation. And as I'm talking to her and doing this interview, getting the details of their relationship history, she spontaneously tells me, unprompted, I think he was poisoning me. She said, I was very sick in that relationship. I think he was poisoning me. And I about dropped the phone. So I had a lot of collaboration. Now, I could never prove it. People like, well, go get hair testing. Those of you who know my story, I have a major hair loss, so I wouldn't have had the hair samples to be able to provide that. Plus, the time that I realized it was 2 years out, arsenic is dispersed from the body extremely quickly. It only can be found in hair, which I didn't have. So there was no way for me to collaborate this, except that his behavior around every time I collapsed was so bizarre, so odd. He would say the strangest things that sounded like he wasn't surprised and that he had feelings about the possibility of my demise. It's bizarre. So I diminished the risk that I was in. I failed to see this as something serious. And I think that a lot of us do. I think a lot of us underestimate our partner's lethality. I know that this is something a friend of mine was sharing about her partner, how her partner had assaulted her severely and on more than one occasions and just in most horrific ways. And she still, in a way, kind of didn't really believe that he might be successful at this. So let's talk about this, about why we diminish the risk and what are the signs that we may really be at risk. In fact, there's a fascinating research that just came out. It was a TikTok creator who talked about it, how in there it was two studies. Her study was one of them. She's actually the researcher on the study, first author on the study. But there was another study that collaborated her findings, and that what she found was when someone sees somebody else, a person, as an object, they don't believe that person's capable of suffering. They diminish that person's pain experience. They don't see that person as being capable of having pain, which makes perfect sense. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who then doesn't really see you as a stand-up person of your own right and value your autonomy, value your life, and they just see you as an obstacle that's getting in the way of things that they want, then they're not going to think a whole lot of doing whatever it takes to get you out of the way. And they're not going to be regretful or feel remorse or even care about your pain and suffering, because to them, you're no more significant than changing out a car, no more significant than changing out an iPhone. They're just swapping models in their opinion. And how many of us in these abusive relationships feel like we aren't anything? We're not worthy of an apology. We're not worthy of any kind of accountability. We're not worthy even of nice, polite, proper behavior from this person. They feel that they can do or say whatever they want. So let me introduce myself again for those of you who are just joined. I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy. I am a psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience, and I'm a narcissistic abuse survivor. And I'm so thrilled that you're here. And for TikTok, I have a series. I'm selling a series called Narcissistic Abuse Healing in 7 Steps. So it's based on what I've actually been doing in group coaching. I have had this 12-week group coaching that's about ready to wrap up. It's been amazing. I have had a wonderful time with those who are in this group. And based on some of the material that we've worked through and the positive response, I then developed a 7-step series that you can then glean some of that input out. So I know for many of you found that the cost of group coaching was way too expensive, but if you'd like to be able to sort of see a distilled version of what that group coaching was like, which was called Healed and Empowered, this is called Narcissistic Abuse Healing in 7 Steps. Please check it out. I'm super excited about that. It's, it includes questions like thought-provoking, reflective questions. It has exercises. It encourages you to do some homework. It kind of gives some explanations. So if that's something you're really struggling with your healing, you're feeling like you're stuck, you're not for sure what to do with all the rage, what to do with the anger, the guilt, you're even feeling confused about what's real or whether or not you're going to ever get any closure, or maybe you're just super sad, please check that series out, because it talks about those topics and gives you the tools and the ways to think about it to help you process that and heal. So I'm super excited about that. So I'm starting to read your comments to see what kind of, what you guys have been saying or what kind of things you want to talk about today. So somebody wants to know, what's the difference between someone who's narcissistic and someone who has narcissistic tendencies? Mary, that's a great question. I appreciate that. I actually think those two words are interchangeable. Interchangeable. That's the word I'm looking at. They're interchangeable in my perspectives. I would say the difference you want to really hone in, the difference between someone who's a narcissist, in other words, somebody who's been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, versus somebody who has narcissistic traits or tendencies. The truth of the matter is we all have traits and tendencies of narcissism. I don't think you can meet a person who doesn't have a little bit of entitlement, who sometimes isn't perfectly empathic to other people, that it can be a little egocentristic and forget that there are other people's perspectives, those are narcissistic tendencies or traits. Hopefully, you're far on the end of normal, that when that happens, it's far and few between. It's very sporadic. But as you start to get closer to the end of narcissistic personality disorder, then that's somebody who's showing a pretty significant deficiencies, pretty significant, yeah, that's the best word. There's hardwired personality deficits in this individual. And so they're having problems with things like intimacy. They're struggling with emotional regulation. They really don't really see other people as people. They see people as more of an it, and therefore they're not very empathic about other people. They are always out protecting their own reputation and their image. And so it's all about that management of that versus in the management of the relationship. And one of the key things that the DSM-5 talks about, and I think this is a pivotal piece of narcissistic personality disorder, is their personality is rooted in jealousy. Now, you think about what that means. A jealous person is resentful of other people getting ahead. They feel they should be top dog and have everything go the way that they want. And anybody who has anything that's good that happens to these other people, they see it as a takeaway to themselves. So they're very resentful, very bitter. They see life as unfair to them. They feel like everything should come to them. Now, here's the part that's so hard or sad. You think, okay, so they pursue it. If they could pursue it and get some of these things, maybe they'd feel better and then they'd stop having issues with that. But the problem is as fast as they get the attention or admiration or love or whatever it is that you're pouring into them, it pours right through them. You hear the saying, in one ear and out the other. Well, with a narcissist, that's actually literally true. Only it's in their heart and right out the other side, right out their back. So as much as you're pouring in your attention and your love and your promises and your affirmations, it's like literally draining through them like a sieve, draining through them. So it never sticks. Exactly, Bianca. They are an insatiable black hole. That's why, have you ever noticed that you feel so exhausted when you're around a narcissistic person? Is because you're giving and giving and giving. And then there's this insatiable hunger that you can't give enough, not ever give enough, which just sort of like, yeah. So pay attention to that. I noticed when I was reflecting back to that first date with my ex, that at the end, it was a long day. He had flown in and we went out to the beach. Don't think like sexy romantic. It wasn't. I was dressed in shorts and a top. I didn't know the guy. I just met him. So I was very, careful and appropriate. We sat apart from each other and just interviewed and talked to each other. I spent the day with him. And by the end of the day, I was so drained that I actually was sick. I felt given out, like he required too much of attention from me. And instead of rejuvenating me or making me feel, kind of happy and excited, I felt exhausted. And I didn't pay it. I mean, I remember how sick I felt so much that I had to curve the next day and I had to like move away and like just, drop him off and basically said goodbye to him because I was so wiped out from the first day. We had planned to go to church together and I couldn't even do that. But I didn't stop and think about that. The fact that a relationship that's healthy doesn't drain you. But if you're feeling like you're being drained by a relationship, really pay attention to that. So Bipolar Bear wants to know, is there any type of medication that has ever been shown scientifically to help with narcissism? No, not to my knowledge, no. And the reason is because we're talking about neurological hardwiring that gives them a different framework to understand the world. So it's literally, they see the world from a grid that's different from everybody else. Like there are other types of personalities who do too. For example, I'm autistic. So my frame is an autistic frame. Everything that I see or do, I come from that standpoint. I have no idea what it would be like to have normal focus. I don't have normal focus. I can hyper focus. So as a result, I don't know what your worldview would be like. And narcissists are the same. Their grid is a specific grid, and they have no other framework other than that grid. And that is with this low intimacy, this difficulty with empathy, all of that. That would be the grid. Are they born and made? How about the answer to Jen Gen Xer is that it's both. There's a genetic predisposition that's also then activated by environmental causes. The exact interaction of all of that, we really don't know. How can you spend one day with a stranger? Yeah, Rockmore, that's a great question. Well, because this person is flying in from 9 hours away, and they didn't have a car, although they could have rented a car. So yeah, I mean, is it ideal? Is that the way I would recommend anybody doing it? No, I wouldn't recommend that. But on the other hand, remember, this is like 9 years ago, 8 years ago. I'm a much different person today. I probably would have thought differently about that date. And remember, again, I said it was a meet and greet. I would have said that day was a meet and greet. So, and he love bombed me, which by the end of it, I felt like I had met my soulmate. So it was pretty amazing. And I find it really amazing how, even let's take that question. And I know I'm going to assume you asked it in good faith, that you were curious versus being judgmental. But isn't it interesting that we like to sort of say to victims, why did you do it that way? What were you thinking when you did that? But there's a lot of decisions that we all make that when we go back later are like, what was I thinking? I mean, today I probably wouldn't do that, but at the time I didn't know that it wasn't a good decision. And this, just because I made a decision that maybe you wouldn't have done or thought of what is smart, I'm sure you make decisions that I don't think are smart or well thought out, but most of the time they don't go bad. They don't go bad. So we get really lucky that way, and that gets really tough. So I think it's super important that we remember in this community around narcissistic abuse that victims are doing the best that they can all the time, just like everybody else is, and that that's bad stuff happen. And you can do everything right, and it doesn't mean you won't get abused. It really doesn't mean that bad things happen to good people all the time, and good people haven't done anything to invite the bad things that happen to them. And I think we really need to remember that. So I want to talk back about how to assess dangerousness, but you guys are asking so many really good questions, like Ashley, how to deal with stonewalling. If you won't, please don't go anywhere, because I'd love to talk about stonewalling, because that is such a difficult thing to be able to deal with. But here's a great question. So LGBTQ gorgeously 88 just said, if someone is punching a wall and screaming expletives over and over just because you said no to something, that's a red flag for abuse. I left after that night because sometimes I'm worried that I overreacted. So thank you for setting that up. That's a great question. Rockmore 83, I don't really understand. Kind of like when you lose something and folks ask, where did you lose it? I don't really understand what you're saying. I'm sorry. I'm not following you on that. But thank you so much for that great question. So how do you know someone is dangerous? Let's circle back to the main topic today. The best indicator of future risk is past history of danger, past history of violence. If you have somebody who tells you that they have been in trouble, or that they lose it, or that they've struck somebody else in the past, or if you see them mistreat animals, mistreat pets, you're seeing them, like in this situation, screaming and punching holes in and losing it, throwing things, doing property damage. If you see somebody actually threatening harm to you, and you know that they have done something dangerous and harmful to somebody else, please see that as a high risk of danger to yourself. High risk. Yeah, dear Amy, that's what is that helpful? So the best indicator of risk is somebody who has had a past history, because this is what's really important to remember. Like I said, a lot of us have thoughts that are very strange. You could be near an edge of a staircase, lean over and think, what if I fall? And then you start to get freaked out thinking, oh, I might fall, or what if I jump, or what, and you start having these really, really strange thoughts. But just because you're thinking something, it takes a lot of effort, takes a lot. You have to decide to take action. So there's literally a gulf between thinking and doing something. You have to move yourself from the thinking to the doing it in order for it to happen. A lot of us think a lot of strange thoughts, but we never do those things. I don't see that as a risk. But when somebody has crossed that bridge and justified the action, especially action that's seen as inhospitable or inappropriate or criminal, illegal, then they're at risk to be able to do it again. They've crossed it. They've taken their will and put their will behind the thought and then engaged in it and found a way to justify whatever it is that they are doing. So once somebody has done that, then they're likely to do it again. So in this situation where somebody's beating into the wall and screaming and throwing just because you said no, in their mind, they've elevated themselves to the point thinking that who you are as a person, your fear, your desires, what you want doesn't matter. All that matters is what they want, and they're willing to do whatever it takes, even scare you and threaten you, or to throw a tantrum in order for them to get their way. I would then say, yeah, that person is very, very dangerous. And that's a situation in which I'm glad to hear that you got out. I'm glad to hear you fled that situation and never went back. That's definitely a risk. So what other kind of questions do you have about that? Because it's when we see somebody do this, what we often do is we make excuses. We say, oh, they were hungry, or they didn't sleep well last night, or they just get into these moods, but as long as nobody upsets them, then everybody's okay. But you know what? People like that are not predictable, because remember, they don't see the world in the same way that you do. So you're not going to be able to always know what could be a trigger. They may have a trigger that is completely mind-boggling to you, that you wouldn't even see it as a trigger, and they're blowing up because they see an offense in that. That's, by the way, called a narcissistic wound. You can wound them in a way that you think is survivable, no big deal, but to them it's life-ending, and their reputation or the way that they see themselves is so damaged, they're willing to damage you in order to protect that. Yeah, SpongeBob says, yeah, I made excuses for them. Exactly. They made a choice. I love that. That's a great way to put it. Because in order for thoughts to become actions, we have to make a choice. We have to put energy behind it. We have to put our will behind it. We have to justify why we do it, especially when it's something that's inappropriate. We have to justify why we believe that we're entitled to do something that's wrong. That takes a lot of effort. And think about how hard it is for you to do something you think is morally irreprehensible. Like I find it very difficult to lie. I have lied on an occasion when it served my purpose, kept me safe, but I don't like to do it. It's very uncomfortable to me. And morally, I'm just one of these people, I like to really color within the lines. So it takes a lot of effort for me to be willing to break the rules on something in order to do it. I have to really justify it. But if you have somebody who does that easily, then they've already justified why in their mind it's okay to be doing things that are very harmful. Yeah, so let's talk about stonewalling. And if you have more questions about risks and what's lethality, please post those for me. I'd love to take that. And if I miss it, you may have to repeat it for me to say it. Was me saying no to him a narcissistic wound? Yeah, it probably me saying no to her. I'm sorry, was a wound to her. Yeah, thank you for correcting me. Yeah, it was. That person perceived it as a takeaway, a loss, and also a rejection, probably in a way you never meant it, but that person interpreted it that way. And so in their minds, that justified losing it with you because your feelings, your needs, and all of that mattered so little that they are willing to do super scary things in order to melt down. In other words, they felt that and I really love this. This came in on YouTube. They are willing to say that their tantrum mattered more than you mattered. Their tantrum mattered more than your disinterest in being intimate with them. So they're willing to make you afraid, threaten you, and manipulate you in order for them to get their way. Definitely not a safe person. That is not a safe person. Does having ADHD and inattention cause it to be more of a risk for abuse? I find mine's been used against me in my relationship with narcissistic people. I do think that toxic people look for vulnerability in other people. I do think that that is something that they are on the lookout for, because then they know that, like, for example, I'm autistic, and I do think that did set me up for greater vulnerability. It's interesting because Tara and I talked about this on one of our podcasts on breaking free from narcissistic abuse. And if you guys are not checking out that podcast and you want really fascinating discussions about provocative topics, please check it out. This week, we're talking about being socially isolated, how narcissistic people will isolate you and why they isolate you. And next week, we talk about what is it? I just got it ready. Yeah. It's funny how next week we talk about why they destroy holidays, because we're getting ready for Thanksgiving. So if you would like to think about what you're going to do for this upcoming holiday, please check out next week. But this week we're talking about isolation. But yeah, so I do believe that they look for vulnerable people. In fact, mine, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Liz Day said it's the best podcast. I appreciate that so much. We have a lot of fun taping it, a lot of fun working together. But my narcissistic ex actually told me he was searching for a widow. And and I had listed, now talk about like dumb mistakes. Things I wish I could do over if I was to do it over today. I'd never put on, I am on dating apps, and I never put on dating apps that I'm a widow. I just don't. I think it's fine if men want to list that, but as a woman, geez, that makes you just a walking target. One, you end up, people think you have you got life insurance, so they want that, which, by the way, I believe that my guy was after the life insurance, but I believe that. I don't know that for a fact, but he certainly felt entitled to my money. That's for sure. But they are looking for vulnerabilities, and part of it, they're also looking for personalities that are agreeable and conscientious. And again, for those of you on TikTok, I talk about that in episode 2 in that series, Narcissistic Abuse Healing in 7 Steps. That's step number 2, how to protect your personality. So if you'd like to learn more about, do you have a vulnerable personality? Are you highly agreeable, highly conscientious? How does that spell risk for you? And what do you do if you do have those tendencies? Now, when I take that test, and I also list the test in there so you can take it for yourself, I found a fantastic site that gives you the Big 5 personality inventory. Whenever I take it, I score super high on conscientiousness. So again, as I said to you guys, I like to color within the lines. It really makes me edgy when I feel like I'm not following the rules. Ashley asked about stonewalling. Ashley, I want to circle back and talk about that with you. So what is stonewalling? Stonewalling is when somebody shuts a conversation down and just refuses to talk to you about whatever it is that you brought up. You could be in the middle of discussion of something innocent as far as you're concerned. It could be like what you're going to have for dinner tonight. And suddenly they're going to make a big deal about that, find that highly offensive, and then they stop talking and give you the cold shoulder and the silent treatment. Now, there are people, and I really want to make this caveat super important. There are people who get overwhelmed by emotional topics. They just find anything that's like close to conflictual, close to emotionally, big, they shut down. And I think men are a little more prone to that than women. And I'm not giving men an excuse. I'm just saying that there are people who are emotionally overwhelmed, where they feel like overstimulated, like triggered. It's very triggering for them. And that group will look like they're stonewalling, but they're not. They just are like overwhelmed, and they don't know, they're ill-equipped and they're worked up. In fact, the Gottmans, John and Julie Gottman, what they would do is put one of those like pulsometers on people in their couples in their room when they're doing counseling, and they would watch their heart rate and the respiration rate. And when the heart rate would go too high, they would actually stop the conversation and have the couple take a break. Because what happens when you get overstimulated like that, your prefrontal cortex shut down, which means you can't think about what you're wanting to say and where you're going to go. So you literally you go offline. And but they're not doing it for punishment. They're just doing it because they're overwhelmed. So I recommend, if you're one of those people who get super worked up and you feel like super triggered in a conversation, say to your partner or whoever you're talking to, hey, I'm feeling over the top worked up. I need to take 30 minutes to cool off, but let's come back and finish this conversation in 30 minutes. Just circle back and then talk about it once you're feeling more calm. But stonewalling is something really different. Stonewalling is what toxic people do to control the conversation. So whenever you move it into a realm that they don't like, either because they want to tell you, control you, and get you to feel like you can't talk about certain topics, and they want certain things to be off limits, or they want to disempower you, or they want to find a way to shut you up, kind of mute you. Then what they do is they disengage and disappear, and they're teaching you. It's sort of like, think of classical conditioning. If you are training an animal, you would reward them for doing the right thing, and then you would withhold something when they do the wrong thing. That's what they're doing. They're withholding human contact because in their minds that they see you as doing something wrong. It's a form of punishment, and it's abuse. So stonewalling is abuse. Like I said, though, it's really important for you to separate that from those who are just being highly triggered. So if your partner never wants it to be brought back up again, and they feel like any topic is not under their approved list, or you don't talk about it in the right way, in other words, they control the narrative for your relationship, chances are that's more of the silent treatment or stonewalling versus somebody who's just gets overworked up and overwhelmed. Yeah, thank you for that. Very great question. I appreciate that. Oh, I feel like when somebody gets to know me or my story, I end up alone. Isn't that hard? Thank you for saying that. I find that really hard too. Anybody of us who've been through abuse, it is hard talking about this because it makes the stigma of surviving this attaches to us, unfortunately, in the perspective of the public. And it makes you feel like you're strange. I find that what I do is I have a story that I tell. I just say to people when I'm out trying to meet someone new, I said, yeah, it was a tough relationship. And I just leave it at that. I figure that I don't know if I'll ever really get into all of what happened in that relationship with my new partner. I think it would have to take a lot of time and a great deal of trust for me to want them to know much. Now, my problem is they could go buy my damn book and then read about it. And I'm hoping that anybody that I meet would respect me enough for me to say, I don't want you to doing that. Please don't buy that book and read it. I'm fine with you guys reading it because I want you to know that you're not alone. But I don't really want my future romantic partner to read about the details of a very difficult thing that I survived. I didn't write it so that I know the whole world can know, but I really wrote it for victims. I didn't really write it for you get what I'm saying. So I do understand what you're saying. It's really, really hard to feel like how to talk about this in a safe way, very much in a safe way. Yeah, Stephanie said, I've never dated anyone. I'm just too scared to tell them what happened to me. I'm also scared of men in general. I have a question for you. How many of you guys are struggling with some form of agoraphobia, meaning, oh, thank you for the gift, meaning like you don't feel comfortable going to new places. You really like to stick to your familiar areas, your familiar people. And that it showed up after the abuse or it worsened after the abuse. How many of you did it show up after the abuse or it worsened? Yeah, on TikTok, people are like, yep, 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 yep. Oh, and now I'm starting to see all of that happen over here on Instagram as well. There's no studies that I know of the connection between agoraphobia and abuse, but I've noticed so many of us have significant issues meeting people, getting outside our comfort zones. We really like to stay in our neighborhood. We like to go to the same store that we know really well. We don't like to go to see new doctors that we're struggling with. Really, our world has gotten small. It's made us feel not safe to take. It feels risky. In other words, going into the unknown with people that we don't know feels risky. And I've known that I've noticed a connection and I wish somebody would study that because I think it would be fascinating, just really fascinating. I know for me that it certainly my world got a lot smaller. I'm working hard to not let it be tiny. I'm really working hard to kind of press back. Yeah, Invisible Borderline says she's been agoraphobic now for 5 months. She can barely leave her house. I think that's so common for so many of us. Yeah, thank you for all of you sharing that. So let's talk back about danger. How do you guys know what? Let me ask you this question: what's been your biggest issue around protecting yourself better? Is it that you don't know when you're at risk? Is it that you feel like you get no support from your social support system, that you really are at risk and they kind of diminish it or poo poo it? Or is it that you see risk everywhere, even when maybe there's not risk, or you don't even know when there really is risk? What is your biggest struggle at this point around assessing dangerousness in relationships? Yeah, they do definitely love to use a smear campaign, that's for sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, a lot of you are saying that your social support system has shrunk. Oh, like that you see risk everywhere. Yeah, it does. It does make it really, really hard. I know that I'm way more cautious. I'm extremely cautious these days. I trust a lot slower. I anticipate people not being healthy, and so I'm a less likely to take risks with them. Yeah, scrap along mail, scrap a mail. I always say scrap along. It's not. I know it's a scrap a mail, but I love instead of alpha male, you're a scrap a male. It took me forever to get that. I kind of missed it. We're not worthy at all. What are we not worthy of? I mean, is there a conversation that you're responding to that I'm missing? Yeah, so Jesus Retest said, I've had it about 5 years after the abuse. I didn't want to travel alone to go to new places, but his faith has really healed him. That's awesome. Or faith really healed her. I'm not sure if you're a man or a woman, but that's really awesome. The day I experienced the morphed face and black eyes of the malignant male narcissist, I am more cautious and watch what they do next. Hey, I heard this was a great test. Somebody gave a really great idea of what to do, and I think this is they say call it planting a dud. Oh, thank you, Jesus. I appreciate you letting me know you're a woman. They call planting a dud. So this person actively plants a dud in every relationship that they meet, and this tells them whether or not they've met a toxic person or not. So let me describe it to you. I thought it was so smart. So what they do is they have a piece of information about them that may not even be true, or they've exaggerated it so it's not exactly what the way they say. Like, so for example, one of them was she said she really hates her middle name, super hates it, super embarrassing, can't stand to have anybody call her by a middle name, and is really, really upset when somebody uses it, and they make it a big deal, and they get the other person to plead and ask them. In other words, to seek out that information again. They sort of pique that person's curiosity and make them want to know what that is. And then she tells them. Now, mind you, it actually isn't an issue for her. Her middle name is no big deal. She doesn't care that you know her middle name, but she says she cares. She says it's a big deal. And she says you have to pick a piece of information that is remote. In other words, something that's not likely to get said or done in normal conversation, like who talks about your middle name? We just don't. That's kind of a good example. And then she says she waits and watch. Oh, thank you so much for the gift. She waits and watches what that person does with the information. Healthy people will tuck it away and never bring it up ever again because you said, I don't want it done. I don't want it mentioned. It's something that's really close to my heart. It bothers me a lot. So healthy people will respect that. Unhealthy people can't wait. They'll wait a few weeks and then they'll drop a bomb and they'll use your dud. They'll bring it up. Yes, exactly. You saw that same video, Kate. She talked about her fear of ghosts. That was her other dud. Her middle name was one of the duds, and the other dud was she had a great fear of ghosts. She actually doesn't. And so she waits for the person to bring it up. She makes sure it's something kind of like really odd so that they don't, use it. So what don't you like about that, sassy bad? I would love to know why you don't like that idea. I thought it's a great idea. I think I think I do something similar to that, but I don't actually like plan to dud. I told you guys I don't like lying. So to me it'd be super uncomfortable. It's just like really uncomfortable. But I do but there are information that I may share with you that are not really big deals to me, but you may think it's a big deal. It's yeah, it's a test. It's a pass or fail test. Yeah. So I may say something that to me you'd think, "Whoa, wow, they really trust me to tell them that I can't." Okay, here's how it happened with my ex. And I don't care you guys know this. It's no big deal to me, but I was kind of trusting him with it, but and when he did drop it on me, I didn't really care. It was like, "Now I really know something about you." But one of the things that was one of mine was that I often have a problem spilling food on my shirt. And if you're around me any length of time, you may see that happen. Actually, I've gotten really good at laundering my clothes and getting stains out. I've gotten good at that. It's like good skill to get you have when you're always dropping food on your clothes. So I told him about that. The fact that as a kid, it was something I felt super sensitive about. That it was an issue in my family. It made my mom and dad really mad. All that's true, by the way. It did really upset my family. And but I have now as an adult kind of figured out what nobody ever told me. People lean forward. I didn't know that. I would somehow lean back, and of course it would go right down my front. Anyway, so sure enough, a year into the marriage, he spills ketchup on the front of his shirt. And you know how miserable ketchup's to get out of a white shirt. And he walks past me, looks down at it, and says, "I got to be careful or I'm going to become like you." There it was. There was the dud. Now, I didn't set that up, but it worked that way. And it told me a whole lot about him, that he was the kind of person who is willing to store stuff away. He remembered that. That was a conversation I had with him when I was dating. He remembered that, tucked it away, and waited for the right moment to drop it on me to hurt me, knowing that he wanted to hurt me. He wanted to hurt me. So you don't have to like lie. You don't it can be you can just like pick a detail about you that you really don't actually like have strong feelings about. It's not that big of a deal. And then let the person know it, and then watch what they do with that information. And what they do with that information tells you a whole lot about them. Then you know this is not a safe person. So the things that we want to watch out for that tells us we have a safe relationship is, do they keep our trust? Do they respect the things that we tell them and keep things secret from other people? If they trust you with something big that's going on in their life, are you able to keep it? How do they treat people when they're not thinking they're being observed? So how do they treat their underlings? How do they treat the pets in the house? How do they treat the animals? People who are toxic and dangerous will be dismissive. They'll be harmful. They may even hurt animals. They'll take their rage out. They'll think nothing of affecting other people. So watch what this person does when they don't think anybody is watching. Yeah, Bianca says that her partner used to kick the Chihuahua. Exactly. I love this. Mrs. T says she tells people that she's afraid of bugs. Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah. So watch what they do when they don't think you seeing them, and watch what they do when they're treating people who have less power than them. That tells you a whole lot about them. Watch what they do with your information. Do they respect the things that you tell it? Hold it sacred, create space for you. If not, then you're with somebody who doesn't see you as an equal, who doesn't respect you. Someone, as Marie says, someone asks me something I don't want them to know. I say it's a boring story, really. I love that. Oh, yeah, I imagine invisible borderline that you were very careful about. I know about your partner, how dangerous your partner was. Yeah, how many of you guys felt very nervous leaving your toxic partner, your toxic person in your life alone with vulnerable pets or vulnerable animals? I for me, one of the ones I felt afraid of, my ex was always grooming women. He was always looking for the next person he was going to cheat on, and it didn't matter. Their age didn't matter. It didn't matter whether or not they were married or not. It just, all he cared about was if he thought you were interesting, he would start to groom. He would do it in front of me. I watched him do it, literally doing it in front of me. So I started feeling like protective of these women who had no idea. They didn't know. They thought he was just being nice and was kind of flattered by his attention. I knew that he had very dark reasons. He was a terribly dangerous person, that he had no boundaries when it came to that at all. None. So yeah, it is an ick. I agree. A lot of, I look back on that. This is just an extra thought that I'm having that I want to share. I don't know why I'm saying this out loud to everybody, but I look back on a lot of that and I think I can't believe I put up with that. I can't believe I stuck with it and put up with it. The person I am, see, I used to value relationships above myself. Don't do that. You are worth more than a relationship. So I was raised in a very religious home that said that marriage was sacred and that it was like it seemed to matter more than me. So I placed it on this high pedestal and I stuck with things that today I think, hell no, no way, no way. If I ever was in a relationship where I saw somebody grooming, literally, he was grooming a 20-some-year-old nurse who was pregnant, expecting her first baby. I actually found text messages after years after I got out of that relationship where he disappeared on her because he moved on and our relationship blew up. And she was wanting to know where he went and that he was so helpful and so supportive. And where was, like, it made me sick because I knew what he was up to. He was waiting for the right moment to compromise her. That's what he was up to. It was awful. So today, I see that kind of behavior. I'm out of there. I don't know. No relationship is above my worth. You are the most important person. You're not deserving of someone's disrespect and ill treatment, callous treatment. You're very much worthy of someone loving you and protecting you and showing kindness to you and being loyal to you. That's what you're worth. Someone faithful. Absolutely. So today, no, I won't put up with it. Yeah, Mrs. T says if you fail in a faithful relationship, you're part of what's wrong with the society. That's how I was raised. I was very much raised that. And I know that there's big pockets in the world where people continue to view that women, particularly women. Thank you so much, you guys, for these gifts. Particularly women are taught that it's our job to hold the fabric of a relationship together when we have a partner who's putting no effort together at all. So yeah, this is a great question. Thank you for asking me this. Can somebody with a cluster B actually change? So no. Dr. Ramani talks about it like this. And this is a great way for us to kind of wrap up this conversation today. Yeah, and actually is another great question. I'll take a couple great questions here to wrap it up. But to come back to this LGBTQ gorgeously 88 is that it's hardwired. It's part of their personality. That's why it's called a personality disorder. It's a disordered personality. Well, your personality is who you are. So it's literally who you are. You're describing innate hardwired qualities that are not, they're very resistant to change. So Dr. Ramani talks about it this way. She talks about it from the rubber bands theory, which I thought is a great way to think about it. So you can take a rubber band. So imagine that personality, that cluster B personality is a rubber band. You can stretch it, get it into new shapes, but the minute it's under stress, it's going to snap back into shape, its original shape. So despite whatever you can do, and they can learn maybe better regulation, maybe they can actually learn how to show sympathy even though they don't feel it. Maybe they can like try to imagine putting themselves in your shoes with cognitive empathy, even though they're going to always struggle with affective empathy. But the minute they're stressed or feel threatened, they're going to revert back to the original way that they usually are. Yes, DBT does help. That's dialectic behavioral therapy does help. But again, it's hardwiring. So it takes resisting their natural sense of way of being in the world. Very, very difficult. So I would say, this is just as me. I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do, but I don't want to be in a relationship with somebody that when things go wrong or are stressful, they're going to snap back and then be very self-motivated, self-invested, and they're going to struggle having any room for me or knowing how to stand alongside of me and caring for me. So here's the thing. I don't know how many of you guys know my story, but I was married before. I was married 31 years to a man who is a pretty good guy, really good guy, 31 years. And he passed away from cancer. And he had my back. He was a very loyal person. You could trust. He was the kind of guy that, and this actually happened. If he told you he's going to move, and who wants to help people move? I hate moving. Please don't ever ask me to help you to move. But if he told you he's going to help you move, and he woke up that morning sick with the flu and he was vomiting, he would still show up to help you move because he told you that. So that's what I lived with for 31 years. Now compare that to the 3 years that I knew the narcissist who never had my back, and you couldn't trust anything he said. And his loyalty was always to himself. And if the minute he thought he could get away with it, he would do it, because that's how little he thought of me. When I compare those two experiences side by side, I will never put up with that again, ever. I'm happy alone. That's how little I want that kind of experience again in my life. So I'm saying, if you guys have that kind of choice, don't choose to be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't care about you, doesn't respect you, doesn't trust you, isn't loyal to you. You're worthy of those things. So there's been a question. Kate's talking to somebody, Nina. Nina must have asked somebody, does narcissists cheat? They don't always cheat. I know there's a lot of people who say narcissists always cheat. Yes, a lot of narcissists do cheat. I even know that there's a self-aware narcissist who says, well, they cheat in some way. They're cheating you out of something. Let's just talk about cheating for what it really is. No, not all narcissists cheat. I treated narcissists in the office. A lot of my clients who were narcissistic, who came to see me for counseling, never cheated. If cheating was an indication of a narcissistic personality disorder, then it would be in the DSM-5 as one of the indicators to say, oh, and they must cheat. It doesn't. It's not in the DSM-5. But a lot of them do cheat. That's definitely true. A lot of them do, because they're low empathy. And they're very egocentric. They view whatever they deserve, they should get it. So yeah, a lot of them cheat. But it's not all of them cheat. The other question that came in that was really, really a great question was about the psychopaths. Are all psychopaths dangerous? Oh, thank you so much. Someone just subscribed. I appreciate that so much. Yeah, Nina wants to know if psychopaths be dangerous. Not all psychopaths are dangerous any more than all narcissists are dangerous, but it does increase your risk of dangerousness because of the low empathy and the fact that they have a callous regard for other people and a callous regard for rules. So I definitely would be careful, because again, I would go back. Do they have a history of being dangerous? Have they history of assault and harm? Do they do property damage? Do you see them treating animals and pets poorly? I mean, I go back to these key questions. And if you see that, I would see that as, yeah, that person is possibly dangerous. Somebody else asked if I do counseling these days. No, I don't do counseling, but I do have a club and a community. This is one, thank you so much for asking that question. My community, I now have a low-cost community. So if you want 24/7 chat support and direct access to me through chat and my book for free for $19.99 a month, you can join my community. But if you'd like to have an addition of 4 hours a month of group coaching, live group coaching, and also we're doing a book club together and even more contact with me, please come in as a club member. So both of those are through the Toxic Free Club. There's the community for $19.99, and then there's the more intense, group, live groups, live book clubs, all these types of things. That's $75 a month. And when you think about it, you're getting this. If you think about how much coaching would cost per hour, you're getting all of that for less than the cost of one coaching call an hour. But these days, no, I don't do any one-on-one directly. I did that for 20 plus years and I just kind of burned out. So it is a good bridge between therapy. In fact, I have group members who are deliberately in there to bridge between therapy and letting go of it. Yeah, in fact, one of them right now is talking to you. So, and we're about ready in about 10 minutes to go to live together to spend an hour and talking about whatever issue you might be having. So if you're looking for more support, either the chat, you're looking more chat support and really great people who will love on you, give advice, get advice from me. Think about the community. If you want more intensive support, you want the live group support each week, consider joining the club. And don't forget the series that I have available through TikTok called Narcissistic Abuse Healing in 7 Steps. Hey, this has been so amazing. I really appreciate you guys talking with me. We had a lot of activity here across all the 3 platforms. For those of you who don't know, I'm always live at 4 p.m. roughly on Tuesdays, Central Standard Time. And I love that you guys are here and hang out with me. Be sure to follow so that you can stay notified when I go live again. And I usually announce it. Now, last week I didn't, but I almost always announce the topic on YouTube. So if you'd like to know what the next week topic, check it out on Monday for Tuesday. You can check out on Monday what we're going to be talking about on Tuesday. And you guys have been so generous with me today. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And it's so lovely to hang out with you guys. And I will see you here back next Tuesday. And you guys stay safe and stay strong. And big hugs to everybody. Very, very much. Big hugs. All right. Bye-bye, guys.